Bishop Mayor. Good to see you.
Okay, all this love. Can we get started?
Blue suit's the thing to wear today.
I was gonna go like this to you. Okay, ready? Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ann Williams-Isom, and I'm the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. The mayor is constantly asking us to think creatively about how we address issues facing our city and how to enlist the whole community in problem solving. It's not just government or just business or just community groups and advocates. It is all of us working together, and it's about individuals all across the city putting their time, effort, and energy into making New York City stronger, safer, and more equitable. Today's announcement shows the power of individuals coming together to work to help our fellow New Yorkers. I want to thank the mayor for bringing us together this morning and for leading this effort, and for always providing us with the North Star that we need in order to move towards and to move forward. I'd now like to introduce Mayor Eric Adams to kick off this announcement.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. It's good to be here with friends and allies for so many years. Norman, Siegel, and I have stood side by side on so many issues. And actually, you saved my job when they tried to fire me in the police department. Just realized that. Before we get into the topic at hand, we do have a National Weather Service heat advisory for New York City that would be in effect from Wednesday the 20th through Thursday, July 21st. We're looking at temperatures to be in the upper 90s on Wednesday and Thursday. This is serious heat, and we're really concerned about those, particularly with pre-existing respiratory conditions. And so we're going to be opening the cooling centers. They will be open through Thursday. And of course, beaches and pools are open for the summer. And New Yorkers can also find ways to stay cool at newyorkcity.gov/beattheheat or by calling 311. And we want to make sure that during these times, there's often a moment with our electricity. We're in contact with Con Edison and PSEG Long Island, and we're going to continue to monitor the situation. The Office of Emergency Management is on top of this, but we cannot stress enough to take all the necessary precautions. And the basic thing: check on elders, drink water, rest if you're outdoors, and just really be conscious of the heat that we're facing. And so I want to thank Deputy Mayor William Isom, and again I want to thank Norman Siegel. He approached me when we first started doing our homeless outreach, particularly on the streets, and with his years of experience that goes so many years back in dealing with homelessness, some of the most prominent cases, Norman represented those. And he critiqued. He says, listen, I would do it a different way, Eric. I would like to bring my expertise to it, the ways, some things that you're doing, I just don't agree on. And friends can disagree without being disagreeable. And as I always say, if you got a better way to build the mousetrap or a better way to deal with the crises, bring your game forward and put skin in the game. Because a lot of people, Norman, they critique, but they don't want to do anything. But it's about coming out and getting engaged. And that's what he did. He reached out to a real pioneer in this space, Bob Hayes, that really understand this issue. They came together and created this volunteer-driven initiative that we're excited about, and he will lay out the full pieces of it. And when he sat down and rolled it out with my team, he met with Deputy Mayor William Isom, Commissioner Gary Jenkins, and others, and they sat down and talked about it over and over again. They peeled back layers and layers to deal with how we're going to move forward in this initiative. And our best ideas come from everyday New Yorkers who have spent time in a particular field or who want to do the best they can to solve a real complicated problem. Complicated problem. Friday, I was out with Shams the Baron as we walked the streets of Harlem. And we saw people who really were not in a position to even take the care and services that were being offered. We took the bus over to Ward's Island around 11, 12 o'clock at night and spoke to some of the men and women who were going into shelters or who were just outside. Those who want to simplify the complexity of homelessness, there's a reason no one has gotten it right thus far. There's a reason. And part of that reason is because no one was willing to listen to all aspects of this. This administration is willing to hear those who have great ideas. We care about this city. One can say what they want, but you cannot take away from the fact I love this city. And the people I love in this city are those who are living in homes and those who are homeless, because I speak with them every day that I could possibly talk to them. And particularly those our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness. There's no dignity in living on the streets. There's no dignity. And the conversation is what is the pathway to take people off the streets and into permanent housing. So we could have a conversation on what pathway. I'm using my pathway, and today Norman is going to lay out what he believes another pathway, another layer to do this. But there's one thing we don't disagree on. There is no dignity in living on the streets. That we agree on. And so we're going to lean into the things we agree on and not the things that we disagree on. And I'm pleased to announce that 4 months into our subway safety efforts, I remember the day. Week one, we had 22 people, and everyone talked about the failure of our initiative. We're up to over 1,700 people that we were able to build a relationship with off our subway system and put them in a pathway to our shelters, and want to put them in a pathway to permanent housing. So you could raise a conversation, well, how long did they stay? Did they stay forever? One day off the street is a day towards permanent housing. That's what it's about. It is actually doing something. Too many administrations have stood by and watch people on our subway system and act like they didn't see them. Well, you know what? I saw them. I saw them from day one, and I am pleased of the plan. Our teams are making approximately 814 engagements each day, and several of them I make when I speak with people on the street. And we are engaging people, building trust. They're becoming familiar with our faces. We are bringing them to a place of trust, because it's all about trust. And listen, a recent poll that we saw, 60% of New Yorkers understand this is a real issue, and they understand that we are leaning into this issue. And so we know that we have to solve this problem. We cannot just walk by and pretend it's someone else's problem. It is our problem. I am responsible for taking people off the streets and placing them in permanent housing. And so starting in early August, for those who are harder to reach, there's a lot of layers to reaching some folks. When you've been doing this work, they're harder to reach. And for those, we developed a new strategy in close coordination with advocates and partners. We're going to take an approach that other administrations have not tried. We're going to connect one-on-one, heart-to-heart with New Yorkers that are living on the street. And I'm calling on all those who are out there that have tweeted and Instagram and Googled and wrote articles. I'm calling on all of you now to get skin in the game. Come and volunteer, because when I hear someone complain, the first thing I'm going to ask, did you volunteer? It's a right to complain, and that right starts with you volunteering. And so this initiative is an all-hands-on-deck situation, and we have no time to lose. We will pair you with city outreach workers. We'll give you the proper training. We're looking for everyone to participate, those who with lived experience of homelessness, faith leaders, retirees, and everyday citizens. This is about building trust. And we want our unhoused neighbors, because these are our neighbors, and we want to offer solutions like independent housing, mental health services, and substance use programs. Yesterday we were at Fountain House, walking through Fountain House, and an amazing model, and keep in mind my Commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene came from Fountain House. This entire administration is filled with people who have private experience of showing compassion to those who are in need. Listen, and this is not going to be easy, but we have a moral duty and a moral responsibility to stop neglecting and denying those who are in need. And we're asking people that if you see someone who needs help, please call 311. Social change happens one person at a time, one call at a time. And rest assured, your individual acts of compassion will become contagious. And we will all start believing the possibility is here. And so I want to thank, again, Norman and Robert for their years of commitment and their willingness to come and use their efforts to make this happen. And to my young interns that are out there, I see you guys and ladies back there. You know, you are now part of our administration, and trust me, this is the most exciting administration you're ever going to be a part of. I told the press when I first got elected, y'all gonna have so much fun covering me, you know? And so we enjoy this. I want to turn this over to my friend. I'm gonna come back up. Okay, you come on.
Sorry. I know he's going to get mad at me. But, you know, the other thing I was going to say is you said we went from 22 to 1,700, but it was because you leaned into us and you made sure that we got the work done. And you said that failure is not an option and that failure will teach us, but you kept on pushing us. So I just want to note that and appreciate that. The other thing that you said, Mayor, was you talked about dignity. And I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, I texted you when I was out at a restaurant with my friend, and there was a homeless man that was in front of the restaurant, and somebody must have called the police. And as soon as the police showed up, my friend and I ran out, and we engaged with this man. We found out his name. We found out that he had 2 daughters that lived in Florida. We found out that he had 7 brothers and sisters here in New York City. He wasn't just a person that was acting crazy out in front of the restaurant. He was a person who needed support. So we stayed with him, and we talked with him until the DHS outreach workers came. And when he was leaving, he said, "Hey, sis, can you pray with me?" So I grabbed his hands, and we said the Lord's Prayer together. I almost couldn't concentrate because he remembered the words almost better than me. So I knew that in there was someone who didn't need a new life. He had a life. We needed to reconnect him to the services and to the homes that he needs. That's what we're about, and that's why we're here. So, to Norman Siegel, a person who really doesn't need an introduction. Norman has been a champion for New Yorkers and everyone, fighting for civil rights for decades. He formerly served as the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union chapter here in the city, serving the organization in various roles for some 25 years and has a distinguished legal career. Even though you left the ACLU, you never stopped serving the city. You have worked time and again with our Mayor Adams on issues ranging from police-community relations to FEMA rule changes during the heart of the pandemic, and so many others. And as a fellow attorney, Norman, you've led the way for so many of us who are advocates across the city and across the nation. It is my pleasure to present Norman Siegel.
Well, welcome to all of you today. I want to thank Mayor Eric Adams for his support for this initiative. I want to single out the Deputy Mayor, Ann Williams Isom. She got it exactly right. Those are real people. We can connect with them. We have to respect them. We have to understand where they're coming from, what they need. And then we turn to the government and say, provide it. I want to also thank Gary Jenkins in that terrific light blue suit, appropriate for today. We are color coordinated, I see. That's one plus for the day. I want to thank Shane Cox for the DHS work that he does. Ms. Mart, thank you. And Jill, I forgot your last name. Barry. I thank you also. Also, when the mayor and Ann are singling out me, that's not the way I am comfortable. We put a team together, ourselves, advocates. First person I introduced in 1979, many, many years ago, as a young lawyer from NYU Law School, filed the Callahan case. That established the constitutional right under the state constitution, Article 17, subsection 1, which is a theme that motivates us. This government, during the crisis in the 30s, the state had the foresight to create a constitutional obligation that the government owes to the people who need the aid and support. It's a constitutional provision that sat there. Bob Hayes had the foresight to bring that case, and that's the legal framework for 40 years. And I'll acknowledge, it's a 40-year crisis. The mayor was correct. From Koch to Dinkins to Giuliani to Bloomberg and to de Blasio. They didn't get it right. This is the first time that we, the advocates, are talking to the government, and the government understands what we're advocating for, and they're using our framework. We're excited about that possibility. Harriet Mcdonald, on my far left, she's been with the Doe Fund for 35 years. She started when she was 9. And take a second to remember the unique George McDonald, who created the Doe Fund. We're here in his spirit as well. And Robert is here as the Executive Vice President, Felipe Vargas as the Director of Programming. That is another model program that has helped so many people off the streets. And Mark Greenberg, who's here with the Alliance for Homelessness and Housing. He's been doing it. He's a rookie. He's only been doing it for about 25, 30 years as well. And someone who's not here, one of the lawyers, Deborah Berkman, our rookie. She's only been doing it for 20 years. So what are we going to do? Let's start with the premise that no New Yorker should have to live on the streets of New York. Our experience is most people experiencing homelessness, when asked respectfully, very important, they will tell you that they do not want to live on the streets as well. So there's our common ground. Let me go back in history. 6 decades ago, in the 60s, Americans expressed their commitment to racial equality by participating in the Southern Civil Rights Movement. Many, including New Yorkers, including myself, took direct action, traveling to the South and committing ourselves to the protection of the rights of Black Americans. Today, it is time for New York to create teams of concerned residents, students, hopefully you're listening, formerly homeless people, social workers, doctors, lawyers, and people from all walks of life, including the private sector. I'll get to that at the end. For us to venture into our streets regularly to learn about the homeless, who they are, why they are homeless, and what they need to do to come inside. That's what Ann did. With appropriate residential options, we believe that street homelessness in New York can be ameliorated, never eliminated. I remember in the 50s going to the Bowery and seeing, we didn't call them at that point homeless, but people who had similar problems, but different today with regard, and I'll get to that in a second. If we can do this, this would be good, first, for the people experiencing homelessness, and also for all of us who are New Yorkers. A few months ago, the mayor received a report from a citizens commission called New Yorkers for Social Justice. We published 81 recommendations to the mayor to make our city fairer and more just. This is one. SHAP, as we call it, the Street Homeless Advocacy, and that is key, Advocacy Project, will recruit New Yorkers to become advocate supporters for people living on the streets. Ms. Joshi, raise your hand. She's one of our first volunteers. A LMSW. We believe in social work and social workers. We will do training, which will create a new generation of New Yorkers who use skills, compassions, and talents for the public good. Sam, raise your hand. He's 15, probably in high school, hopefully. And we will reach out to especially young folk to get them to realize that they have critical skills that are needed today to create that torch of freedom and justice that my generation was involved in, to make sure this continues. The challenge, and it is a challenge, be for us together to identify the existing appropriate options that match what a homeless individual needs and will accept. We will work with the mayor and the Adams administration to provide the needed housing. What is the needed housing? It's different parts. Independent and supportive housing, stabilization and safe haven placements. But it's not just that. It's mental health, substance and alcohol use disorder, and job training and placement programs. There are people out on the streets that are working. There are people out on the streets who can work, want to work, and we've got to create those opportunities. Hopefully, we can reduce the barriers that currently exist that prevent us from achieving those goals. This plan will succeed only if we identify and develop the options and remove the barriers. The barriers, after 40 years of bureaucracy, in my opinion, not adequately caring about the people on the streets, need to rethink the process of when you go to even a congregate shelter. Why does it take so long? Why is the paperwork so burdensome for people? What about programs like the Doe Fund, when they're out on the streets and they identify someone who's a drug abuse person or alcohol abuse, and they have space in their facility, and they want to take them, and he or she wants to go? Why do we have to go through the government to make that match? We should be able to do it immediately. Those are some of the barriers. There's more barriers. We're working with the administration, and as I said before, it's enlightening to talk to people who listen and are willing to rethink some of these rules. With the support, participation, and I make this pitch to fellow New Yorkers, we need you. Together, we can, legally, realistically, and humanly, confront, address, and ameliorate the unacceptable long-standing tragedy in our city of fellow New Yorkers living in our streets. It is time to act. If you are interested in participating in SHAP, please contact us at nyccshap@gmail.com. I'll repeat, nyccshap@gmail.com. And for those of you who want to call us, we're willing to listen and talk with you. 212-537-6772 in English and in Spanish. 212-537-6772. What we're trying to do is make a difference. Will we succeed? Only time will tell. It's been going on for too long. Those of us here today, and hopefully those of you in the public, including the private sector, we need you. You see the people on the streets. You see them in the parks. As the mayor says, don't close your eyes. Call us. There are all kinds of services and personalities we need to make this work. Realistically also, it's not going to happen in a week or a month or a few months. You're talking about something that took 4 decades. I'll be happy if in a year from today we have decreased 25% of the people out on the streets. That's the realistic goal. Too often people get at these podiums and give false expectations. We will not do that because we know the realities of what we're taking on. But as people who love this city, and more important, love the people who are made up of this city, especially the powerless, the underdogs, the people who don't have bank accounts, who have trouble meandering this very complex city. We're here for you. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Bob Hayes.
So Norman is at least as obstreperous as the mayor in not following the rules for Ann. But I did promise the mayor that I would finish in 2 minutes, so put on your timers. First, I do want to say thank you. This administration is a breath of fresh air. I don't know the mayor, but I have to commend him for his wisdom at listening to characters like Norman Siegel, who has been a voice crying out in the wilderness for a very, very long time. Look, I want to put a little bit of perspective on this. We are going to be bringing fresh faces, fresh voices, unskilled people into the connection business with folks on the streets. It is not to replace by any means the millions or tens of millions of dollars the city commits now to professional outreach. They too are frustrated for some of the reasons we will be frustrated with volunteers. The reason I kind of embrace Norman's volunteer ethic, I think, though, is you guys don't know me, but I was literally 24 years old working at Sullivan & Cromwell, fancy law firm, and started talking to homeless people. And back then, there was no issue. There were no contracts. There was nothing by way of support. The charitable industrial complex were ignoring them. And it was by talking to folks that I had the epiphany that, well, kind of ruined my legal career, but led to things like the right to shelter and a bunch of other good things. I think 15-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 75-year-olds involved in this project, the connection, the human factor matters. And that's, I think, part of the great wisdom of Norman's idea here. But look, we're going to fail, just like so much of the other outreach work fails, unless we have the places to bring people. We're not going to be, homeless people whisperers in any way better probably than the folks who are doing it professionally. The key to making this work is having places that work for people. Number one, of course, all we can do is ask the administration to keep working with the state, thrillingly, from my perspective, in a seemingly cooperative way, to keep the gas on in terms of housing development. A long time ago, the 3-word solution to homelessness, Robert Hayes said it was housing, 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 still true. Meanwhile, we have a shelter system. Norman mentioned some of the bureaucratic problems. It still scares too many people. Blame me, I did the right to shelter. Blame a half dozen mayors, but we still can make improvements there. Critical for this outreach, though, is the availability night after night of having either 1, 2-bed, non-congregate respites for people to come in off the streets. All the reports, all the conversations show that that is the answer for people to say, okay, I will try that. I've been to the shelter system, I got scared, I had a problem, I won't go back there. So pretty quickly, I think we probably can move to increase maybe some lessons learned from the pandemic, single rooms, double rooms for people to come inside. Mr. Mayor, I hope I did not exceed 2 minutes. If I did, I apologize.
Thank you. Before we open to questions, I just realized I have one of my former Borough Hall employees. Sherman, come and tell your story.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had occasion to spend 51 weeks in the homeless shelter system. And while there were adversities in being in such a place, many of the other residents were out of state prison, they were out of Rikers Island, and they tried to impose, the kinds of rules that they lived by when they were in those institutions. It made it trying, for individuals such as myself that weren't accustomed to that kind of conduct, the threats, occasional violence. There was one person murdered while I was there, an elderly, and he happened to have been the only, he was an attorney, a retired attorney, and he was intoxicated and he got into an altercation and he was beaten, and the next morning he dropped dead. And there were a couple of other deaths in that particular shelter. And mind you, my understanding is that it was one of the safer shelters in the city system. My background is such that dating way back, first time that I was ever in City Hall was covering then Mayor John Lindsay. So I was a reporter once upon a time and, continue to follow the news on a daily basis. And while I was in that shelter, I was following a reporter by the name of Greg Smith, who was writing about the various homeless shelters in the city. I emailed him. I shared part of my story with him. We ultimately met. He wrote a story about me and my situation and what brought me into a homeless shelter. Various people reached out to me, but whereas he's known for his swagger, this man is also and should be recognized for his compassion and understanding, because it was then Borough President, now Mayor Eric Adams, that reached out to me, sat with me for over an hour, heard my story, asked me to follow him. He tapped a computer and a desk and said, whatever you'd like to do, this is your desk, this is your computer, you come in, and later we could discuss the salary. And as it turned out, I was also contacted by DHS after their having seen the story. And I met with the administrator of DHS at the time, except that I called on another friend, Norman Siegel, to accompany me to that meeting. There were a lot of adversities, not only in the shelter, but also with the system that I found. I didn't qualify for a voucher because of my Social Security income being such, but there was a program whereby the city would pay 1 year's rent toward an apartment, and thereafter you're on your own, and I opted for that. However, the particular apartment that I found, because I'd go out every single day, I went to senior homes, I went all over the city looking for an apartment, and when I finally found one, unfortunately the rent was $100 over half of my monthly income, just $100. And whereas I knew that I was prepared to stock shelves, at Duane Reade or a supermarket, do whatever was necessary to bring in some income, DHS would not grant me that voucher. So I ultimately managed to get a Section 8, at which point Mr. Adams put me on a payroll. I got into a building in downtown Brooklyn. I remained with him for 4 years. I regret having declined an offer that I was made to join the administration. But as a former colleague said, the doors never close to family, because I just left the Brooklyn Borough President's office. But I'll tell you, I cannot imagine what it might be like to live in the street. I just can't. Despite all the adversities, I had a bed. I could ask for an extra blanket if I wanted. Despite some not nice people at times, the staffing, that would purposely, gratuitously close all of the bathrooms. Because why? Because she felt like it. And 30 guys are in the corridor looking to use the facilities, and we were unable to. And when I asked that particular supervisor why, she said, because I felt like it. Bed bugs, fights. If the lights were turned on when everybody's sleeping, it would cause a stir, cause a fight. So I'm glad to be out of there, and I have to thank these two gentlemen, and of course, the guy who broke the story, Greg Smith, as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please give Sherman the information. It's always a job for you, no matter where I am, So they didn't understand your value in Borough Hall, they're going to understand it in City Hall.
And I will represent him in that pursuit.
And it's just fascinating. First of all, it shows the power of the media. You ladies and gentlemen, you take hits from time to time, particularly from me. But the reality is that story started a movement. I remember, drinking my smoothie in the morning, reading that story. This was a prominent leader in the news industry, well respected. People knew him, and there by the grace of God go I. We don't know what crisis is facing us. And he was just such an asset for me in Borough Hall. And, I benefited from him coming on our team. He helped us navigate some of the problems in the shelter system. He was able to be just a voice for those who were unheard. And he just became a friend. And I just thank him for his service, and I am just happy that he knows that we would love to have him to be part of our City Hall team. This is a complex problem. It's a complex problem. You have a former reporter, now he's placed in an environment where some people are coming right home from Rikers Island, going towards Ireland. And now you put in this mixture, this almost toxic soup together. And when I walked through Wards Island Friday, I said, what is the difference between what I saw on Wards Island and what I saw on Rikers Island in the dormitory setting? And we would like to be able to, as Bob stated, give every person that's homeless, a single room, and all the amenities. We would love to do that. The inventory is not there. The amount of money we're spending on homelessness is just astronomical during these tough financial times. So I have to play the hand that the situation was dealt to me. I have to make sure if I have a population that is going to be in congregate setting, the congregate settings must be suitable. Those who need safe havens and other wraparound services, we need to make sure they're in those places. So this complicated chess game of homelessness, we need everyone to be a part of it. And that's why we're willing to listen to everyone for these solutions. And it's my responsibility. And damn it, I want that responsibility. I sat on the sideline and complained of the failures of the past, and I want the ball in my hand. and you go across the country. A group of mayors are here today at the Bloomberg School, and I went to the dinner yesterday. Every mayor I sat down and talked to, you know what they said? Eric, we're facing homelessness, crime, affordability, COVID in our economy. Every city. No one has the answers yet, but we're going to try. So we're opening up to on topic.
On topics? Melissa? Hi, Mr. Mayor.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Are there concerns about safety with regard to people going out who are not, with one of the organizations that's very versed in homeless outreach?
Yes, and we're going to partner the teams with our personnel, and that's part of the training to know how to engage. But we want to create those partnerships and make sure that we could do it to ensure as much safety as possible. What we don't want to do, we don't want the outreach team to be partnered with a uniformed police officer, because that sends the wrong message. And so we're going to do it in a very safe way to ensure that we minimize any interaction that could be harmful, and it's about the right training and right engagement.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
How are you?
Good. A couple of quick questions. First is, how much funding is this getting from the city? And second question, nothing from...
We don't want any money.
Why is that?
We believe in the spirit of people volunteering and coming together. We also think that when I'm out on the streets and I approach someone, when I tell them what we're doing, and they realize that I'm not for the government, I'm a civil rights person, I'm a New Yorker, I'm here to listen, and then maybe after a couple of times, we're going to go out every Thursday night. We're going to come to City Hall with the volunteers. We're going to ask various speakers from government, from the nonprofit sector, former homeless people. We'll have pizza, water, in deference, some plant-based, whatever it's called, and then we'll hit the streets. The teams will be of 4 or 5 people, 1 or 2 from the city, 2 or 3 of us. We will go to the same locations every Thursday night from 7 to 9. At 9 o'clock, we'll go to a coffee shop or something a little stronger, and we'll sit down. We'll do our metrics, our report, to find out whether or not our assumptions turn out to be valid. And we think by doing that, without government funding, with the bureaucracies and the regulations, we'll be free to do what we think we have to do. That's my answer.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could, one other question on the statement you sent out this morning on asylum seekers that are putting a strain on the shelter system. What's your message to the federal government? Do you think they shouldn't be sent here in the first place? I think you said some from the state governments are being sent here on buses. How much of an issue is this becoming, and what's the solution?
It's a real issue, and we are right to shelter a city, and we welcome people during difficult times, and we have been in close communication with the White House, the White House, this administration has been a great partner with us on a number of issues. But let's not leave out Arkansas and Texas and other municipalities. They are sending people to New York. And if New York is willing to show its humanitarian outreach and compassion, then we need to get the resources to go with it. We have close to 2,500 in the last probably 6 to 7 weeks that are here. We already had a overburdened shelter system. And so we need not only federal government, but we need some of those states that have been giving people one-way tickets. We need them to understand that this must be a partnership in this country to deal with those who are coming here seeking refuge or asylum. New York is going to do its share, but we have an overburdened shelter system now.
Conversations with the Texas government and how they're sending people here?
Yeah, I don't know if those guys like talking. We
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
How are you?
Good. Yourself?
Doing all right.
Can you introduce yourself?
You don't know Nolan? This is the legendary Nolan Hicks.
What gap are you guys specifically trying to fill? And the city offers a lot of services. It has outreach teams. It has counseling, supportive shelters, barrack shelters. There's a suite of services. What's the gap this volunteer effort is trying to fill specifically?
Great question. Great question. Like yesterday when I was out with Sham, I was amazed at it's almost an inner ability to connect with people when you've gone through that, because Sham was able to talk to people on the streets that I'm sure if a professional outreach worker would have done that, I don't know if they would have responded the same way. We walked up and down 125th Street from Lenox over to Lexington, and even when we got on the bus, people were just connecting with Sham. And so the gap we're trying to handle is the hard reach population. We got to 1,700. I'm pretty sure if you go through the subway system, you'll be challenged to find an encampment. But there's still those that are that's just hard to reach. And we need folks who have gone through this before to help us reaching that hard to reach population, particularly with mental health issues. And it's to repeat it. It's over and over again, talking to them, building trust, becoming familiar with the face of the individual. We're going to try to keep doing that, but I just think that they're going to bring an extra layer to our ability to reach that population.
Can I just add one other
Yes,
thing?
you can.
To answer your question, the city in the past has refused to acknowledge the racial overtones to homelessness. From way back when Bob and I in the 80s were doing our work, for example, the city put out studies, 45% of the people in the shelter system, their last known place was an SRO. When they got rid of the SROs, which in the J51 program to build different types of housing. And remember, the SROs were not huge facilities. They're usually 5 or 6 story buildings. It didn't have hundreds of people there. So people got pushed out. It was part of the gentrification, especially in Upper West Side of Manhattan. But in addition, the overwhelming percentage back then, we'll confirm it in our work now, there's a racial overtone. I have been quoted many times saying if the homeless were Caucasian, the city would have dealt with it differently. The overwhelming percentage of homeless people in the past were black and brown people. And also I got in trouble by saying the following, and I'll say it again. Even the brown people, they were dark-skinned. The reality of the homeless problem, we'll, in our metrics, see whether it's still accurate in 2022. My observations, anecdotally, again, it's people dark-skinned, poor people, people who've run across hard times. Every one of our teams, ideally, will have a former homeless person who'll be able to say to the person out on the street, I've been there. I understand. I, as the lawyer, will be on a team, but I'll be in the background. Melissa, we are concerned about that, but on my own personal experience for years of doing this stuff, never had a problem. In my opening, I said, if you approach people respectfully, and that's our training. Our training is going to be 3-hour sessions. We're going to train people to, ideally, if we find that someone doesn't adhere to that kind of commitment, they're not coming out with us. And we will do it a pilot initially. We want to make sure, my famous say, I hate to fail. I hate to lose. It's the difference between wanting to win and hating to lose. Coach Gordon at Utrecht High School, when I played JV basketball, instilled that into me back in 1958 and 59. I still remember it. Thank you, Coach Gordon. So there's a racial aspect to this. And my appeal to the private sector, face up to it. Help us out. And you're talking about money. We don't want any government money. The private sector, you can come forward and help us out. No public money.
And just my commissioner shared with me is Arizona that's sending folks up. Arizona. Sorry, Arkansas. Don't you do it, though.
Hi, yes. My question, a couple of questions. You talked about the training. Can you go a little bit in more detail what the training looks like, what these 4 to 5 groups consist of? You said you were going to go out. And then my other question is, how successful is this expected to be if it relies heavily on volunteers? Monkeypox cases are going up. COVID is surging. They're all wearing face masks. How can you expect people to go out at a time where they're going to be put at risk as well?
Well, because we care. When you care, you know, I'm aware. We keep wanting to not go public because of COVID. I read the papers, the sixth urge. We'll wear our masks. If we have to go back to putting on gloves again, we'll do that. But that will be off-putting. We'll go out with masks in our pocket to give some of the folks on the street so that we'll talk to them about that. That'll win over, hopefully, some trust because they'll understand we're there. We'll go back again and again. I did this many years ago. We went to a particular area. There were 13 people. The first week we came with a cup of coffee and we spent some time. It was incredible. They had a street operation. We disagree on the encampment raids, I call them. They're counterproductive, they're negative, but we're still going to agree to disagree on that. And hopefully I can prove to the mayor that encampment raids are a mistake, they're counterproductive. You remember that Saturday, we had a 30-minute intense phone conversation between Eric and I about that issue. I still think he's wrong on that, and we'll keep pushing. That's what advocates do. But in the context of that, we said we'd come back the next week. We came back that Tuesday. At that time, I think we went there at 9 o'clock, and the group was shocked. I said, "What are you shocked?" And they said, "You came back." And I said, "We said we'd come back." And they said, "Nobody ever comes back." I read the Coalition for the Homeless report in 2021, page 32 of their report. They had two people specifically saying people didn't come back. So we're going to come back, and we'll be prepared, be concerned about safety, concerned about the issue that you just raised. But I'll speak for myself. I can't just sit in my house. I can't sit in my office knowing that people are out there. We got to do something. That doesn't mean I'm going to succeed, but we're going to do it. We're going to try. And I'm sure, knowing some of you, now that I know Mr. Nolan Hicks, whatever, all I'm going to say is you'll call us. We'll try to be as forthright and honest in our responses, but we want to make a difference, bottom line.
So what is the training?
Oh, the training. I'm looking at my program for our training, and I'll share it with you afterwards. We're going to have 2 panels. The first panel, I'll just give it to you. Homeless history, legal cases. Robert Klein, who's one of our lawyers, has prepared Callahan, Eldridge, McCabe. Those are the seminal cases. We're going to spend a half an hour on them. What does it mean? We're then going to talk about the shelter system itself, the rules, the regulations, the barriers, the lived experience, and possible solutions. It's 60 minutes. People like Bob, people like Sherman, Harriet, a DHS representative, questions and answers. Then we're going to have a second role-playing, interaction with person experiencing homelessness, 30 minutes. Mark Greenberg, Executive Director, Interfaith Assembly and Homelessness and Housing, will have an example of someone on the street, how he interacts with them, how to teach people that. The final panel, which goes for 45 minutes, the do's and do nots of interacting with homeless people. People like Larry Woods from Riverside, Muzzy Rosenbach from the Bowery Residence Committee. We'll have other people. In addition, we hope our first training session will be August 1. It will be from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. That's the training. We have metrics. The metrics form that we're going to hand out, which is very important so we can quantify and answer your questions. To the person who volunteers, put your name on the form. Who did you speak with? Name, location, phone number, email address. Was the individual cooperative? Yes, no. Does the individual want to leave the streets? Yes, no. If yes, what does the individual need? Housing, safe haven, stabilization bed, job, what kind? Mental health placement, addiction placement, other. Does individual want to see if I can help? Yes or no? Those are the kinds of things. We have a volunteer recruitment intake form, which is 3 pages, maybe a little too burdensome for volunteers. But in response to Melissa's very good question, we have to vet the people who are going to be out there. So we're going to have people who potentially don't know how to respond to someone who's out of control, or people who create the environment to make the person on the street out of control.
And we got for one moment. And what we're going to do, because there are organizations out there already, Muslims Giving Back. They are on 42nd Street. I think just about every Friday, giving out. We gave them a stipend when I was borough president for blankets. They're giving out food, socks, clothing. Now we're going to coordinate this effort of what they're doing with the kiosks over on 42nd Street with the Foundation House. We're going to coordinate with this effort. So there's a lot of disjointed forms of volunteerism that's taking place every day. A young lady came up to me that I introduced Norman to that stated she wants to help. She gives out socks.
Over here. Dina.
I met her on an event in Williamsburg. She gives out socks. She was giving out socks. And so we're now going to coordinate the effort instead of having a disjointed effort so that we can accomplish our task. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, Kate.
Michael.
I got two quick ones. Thanks for taking my questions. The first is, fiscal hawks might say, well, the city's been spending billions on homelessness for years now. What does it say that, you're engaging in a volunteer program now as far as the spending? The second question is, do you envision, if this is successful, turning it into something where there's a stipend attached, like kind of like a city-based, like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps type thing?
Yes. Here's where we're going, and you're right. We spent billions on an inferior product. We keep believing throw money at a problem. Money thrown at dysfunctional actions is going to produce a dysfunctional outcome. Everyone just believes, and I'm seeing this over and over in government, everyone believes throw more money. No, we're just not going to do that. We're spending billions now. And so if we can create a real AmeriCorps, a volunteer corps, this human capital is just unbelievable. A number of students are asking, what can we do? How can we help? Many of our clergy organizations are asking that. And it's about giving people a pathway to use the human capital. That is what we are in abundance. We're not in abundance with our budget. We're going to go through some serious financial challenges in the next few years. Where we are rich is in human capital. And if we could open that and have folks like Norman and Bob and some of the volunteers that are here to really empower other people to just not sit on the sideline and complain about what's wrong with the city, but saying that I'm going to be part of the agents of change. And so if we can do that, I just believe that you're going to see a difference in so many areas on how we can use our human capital. But that's what we would like to do.
I want to make one specific pitch that I left out. As a proud graduate of Brooklyn College CUNY system, I make a public appeal to the 250,000 students in the CUNY system. Contact us. When you come back to school, we need you Thursday nights to be part of this effort. You will, like my generation, when I went in 1966 as part of the Law Student Civil Rights Research Council to places like Mississippi and Georgia, I changed my perspective of what I want to do with my life. We want to do the same thing. We're not excluding the NYUs, the Columbias, whatever, but I make a pitch because of, Nolan, the racial overtones. We want the CUNY students to be able to be involved. And to give your editorial board a little credit yesterday, they raised the issue that the mayor just raised about the economic issues for the future. So more important, even when we began, we need those students coming forward for a new generation of people committed to public service.
Thank you all for your time. Mr. Siegel, I wanted to clarify a couple points you made. The first one is, do you have a sense of how many people you would like to sign up at full capacity for this pilot? And then you also mentioned collecting this data, and you listed what you're looking for. Is that data going to be published? Is it going to be made available for, on government websites? And Mr. Mayor, is it possible for that data then to inform how you're prioritizing building maybe like more supportive housing versus, funding a new shelter, for example?
Well, as a civil libertarian, I draw a wall between government and the private. So the answer to your question, when we get the metrics that we're doing, you call me, I'll give you the answers. I don't know how else to do it. Whether it's going to be on a government website, that ain't my call. That's his call and the folks here. And what was you asked?
Well, she was asking about the using the data, information.
Well, the op-ed that Bob and I published, thanks to Josh Greenman at the Daily News, got us about 10 volunteers, and Harriet got through the Doe Fund 9. So currently we have 19 volunteers. That's enough for us to begin our pilots, because if the 4 pilots are only going to have 2 volunteers, out of the 19, we only have to choose 8. But if we're successful and we get the kind of response that hopefully your editors don't tell you that this is not a story to run, and we get some responses over the next 10 days or so, we could start thinking about, if the pilot works, going citywide. With regard to how many people, that's such a hard question. I heard him at his press conference say, when they asked about how many rooms he was going to provide, as many as possible. I'll say as many as possible.
It's going to be situated, or are they kind of like, the
3
spots for where people are congregating?
Yeah, we've consulted with the city people, and we have 3 locations in Manhattan and 1 in the Bronx. That's conscious. Disproportionate number of street homeless people are in New York County, but we don't want it to be seen as owning New York County, so we'll do 1 in the Bronx, and eventually, if we're successful and the metrics prove we're successful, we'll go to every borough. We're also going to potentially go to places where we know that their people are, but we're also going to experiment perhaps in a place where we send out the word, come to a different location. I've talked to a couple of not-for-profits about potentially on a weekend starting in September doing a concert in some of the parks in the city, in the different, Tompkins Square Park would be a good place, maybe other places, Riverside in Manhattan, and have performers perform so that it's a magnet to people to come also during the daytime with family settings, et cetera, as opposed to when we go out Thursday nights, 7 to night. Once it starts getting dark, one of the reasons we want to begin now is when we go out at 7 o'clock to 9, it's still light. Once it gets to the colder weather, it's more difficult, especially doing this kind of stuff when it's 28 degrees and it's snowing. But we'll be there, as the post office used to say, we'll be there, rain, shine, et cetera.
And it's important to point out, and I think we're going to take one more, and then we'll take about 2 or 3 off topics, because I know I got to bounce. But this is not in replacement of. We need to be very clear on that. This is not in replacement of what we're doing as a city. This is a complement to. And we want others who have other ways of doing this and willing to put skin in the game. So this is not, I don't want it to come across as we are now having a new way of dealing with homelessness in the city. This is a complement to what we are doing, what Deputy Mayor William Isom and Gary are carrying out. So I just want to be clear on that. Why don't we take one more and then a few off topics.
So hi, Mr. Mayor. Amanda hit on a lot of my questions related to the pilot. The last one just being, you described the training as being primarily led by what sounds like professionals, so you're expecting all of these people who are conducting the training to also be volunteering their time throughout this program?
Absolutely. That's the premise.
Logical public safety training portion of this, in addition to some of the history of homelessness?
Sure. The interaction that Mark is going to do for 30 minutes will us lawyers do moot court. Before I go to the court on a big case, when and if I have to sue this guy over here, and when I'm in court, you want your colleagues to question you of how you're going to respond to questions. So we're going to do the same thing. It's not just going to be theoretical. It's going to be someone will be sitting on the floor. Mark will approach them. The people, he'll do that after we've done a panel on theoretically what are the things to do, what the rights are, et cetera. And then we'll act it out, questions and answers. And again, initially, we're only going to have to choose, we think, about 8 volunteers from the group to start the pilot, but then we'll do additional training. The bottom line is we're going to vet the volunteers and the people who go out on the street. And for the new people, let's assume there's some volunteers that have never done this before. Maybe we'll have 1 new person with 4 experienced people. So that person will be, to use the private sector, on-the-job training. And I think young people, all kinds of folks, learning the legal history of the homeless issue and the practicalities will be worthwhile in and of itself, even if they're not chosen to be one of the people out on the street.
You want to do off topics? Off topics? Okay, we're gonna allow y'all to depart from this ritual. Good to see you, brother. Wow.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Shans and I have been talking a lot, so.
Good stuff. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, two things. My editors want your reaction on the decision by Alvin Bragg, DA Bragg, to put the charges against the clerk in the bodega. If you can address that, I would appreciate it. But on the subject of the asylum seekers, you said we need some partnership from the states that are just putting people on buses or planes. How is this going down? Are they saying, like, here's a one-way ticket to New York, show up at PAT, 151 East 151st Street, they're not going to turn you away? Are they telling people where to go?
Right.
Give you a chance to respond to the Legal Aid Society's criticism that you might be scapegoating the asylum seekers for what is already a bureaucratic bottleneck in the shelter system caused by, other factors like high rents, evictions.
That's all good. First, let's peel it back in layers. I'm not quite sure what methods they're using, but based on our interviews and conversations with those who are arriving, they're stating which states they're coming from, and the conversation is something in essence, if you could go to New York, they would make sure you have shelter. Now if you're new to a country, you're just trying to find help. And so if someone tells you, this is the way to do it, we need to investigate, are they giving them one-way tickets? We're not sure. This just got on our radar when we started seeing the high numbers show up.
So has there been anything put in place that would presumably these people don't have a lot of money, right? you know,
Right.
if they're not qualified for food stamps or public assistance like other shelter residents. So how are we making sure that they have like food and diapers and all that kind of stuff?
There you are. You are hitting on those topics of why we're reaching out to the federal government and stating this is a real burden on New Yorkers as we're trying to do the right thing. We already, as I stated, we already have an overburdened shelter system. So now we're talking about, as you stated, food, clothing, school. This is going to impact our schools because we do not turn away individuals because they're undocumented. Translation services. There's just a whole host of things that this is going to produce, and that's why we need help in getting this done, and we need the right coordination to make it happen.
On to the legal aid statement that they put out saying that it would be wrong to sort of blame the problems at the back end of the shelter system on asylum seekers when there are bureaucratic issues that are really contributing to it.
Yeah, I don't know. Calling for help from the federal and those states, I don't know why they believe that's blame. I don't know why they believe that's blame. Quoting in the facts and what we are dealing with. So what we're saying, our system is always already overburdened. Fact. These states are sending people to New York without any communication or coordination. Fact. We're not receiving any dollars in addition to these new responsibilities that we're going to have. Facts. So I'm just not clear on what legal aid believe we are doing that is blaming anyone. We're saying we're going to do our job as New Yorkers, but we do need help to deal with this new wave of those who are in need of shelter. Oh, the DA, and that's probably other people had that question also. They did a thorough investigation, and they made a determination of my understanding the charges were dropped. And this happens sometimes in cases, the preliminary arrests, after review, decisions are made. And so I think in this case, we had an innocent, hardworking New Yorker that was doing his job, and someone was extremely aggressive towards him. And I believe that after the DA's review, the DA, in my opinion, made the right decision.
Hey, Mayor.
How are you?
Thanks, how are you?
You got a tan. You was on the beach.
Well, speaking of the beach, earlier this summer, you know, there was a lifeguard shortage, and I know you said you were going to try new things. You did try new things to get lifeguards to fulfill that immediate need. But I want to look ahead to next year. What are you doing? Are you working with the DOE to provide swim lessons, to teach kids how to swim, and then also perhaps train them to be lifeguards? And I also want to get your take. I know city public schools, about half of the pools are actually open. What that means, who knows? You know, the other half are under construction. But have you been meeting with DOE to provide funding? I know DOE funding is a big issue for a lot of other number of reasons. But what are you thinking? I think you had December 2023 to make sure that we don't have the same scrambling that we did this year when it comes to guards.
Not a doubt. The lifeguards are under a union. We are already engaging in conversation around some of the practices. And we need to be forward thinking. I don't know why we waited until this crisis to happen, which is a national shortage of lifeguards. But we have too many school pools that are being underutilized. There's a beautiful pool, I think at Jefferson, that is not being used. And so we need to do a real canvassing of all of the pools and see what programs we have. We have to be more forward thinking in teaching swimming. I was part of Swim Strong when I was in the borough president's office. We need to be better prepared to deal with the lifeguard issues. Start training young people to be certified, look at water safety with some of our law enforcement communities. We talk about building a better relationship between police and communities. This is a way to do so. So we need to think outside the box so that we're not unprepared in the upcoming years.
Providing more funding to even implement the DOE. I know some people said you can't keep this pool staffed. We now have to cut, art and music programs as well. So is that something you put money toward, whether it be the parks or the DOE?
If that's what needed to be done, we need to do it. But again, I keep going back to the first thing people say, we need more money. First, we need to look at what we're doing with the money we have. I keep saying that over and over again as I keep looking at these agencies. What are we doing with the money that we have? Have we tapped into volunteerism? Swim Strong is want to be a partner. Who do we have already on staff that's willing to do that? So let's peel back all the other layers, and then if we need more money to do so, we should be open to doing that.
We have time for 2 more. Ethan, and then Julia.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Good. On the 1,700 homeless who the subway safety teams have engaged with, how many of them are actually staying off the streets, have been connected to supportive housing and such?
Well, I know we have a couple of hundred that remained off. Some went to live with other loved ones. Some started believing they don't have to live in that condition. But I keep saying, every day off the street is a good day. And I know we like to look at the stats. I understand that. But if I got you off that subway system for that night and had you engage, you may go back the next night, but then you may come back and say, listen, I got a safe place to go to. So I'm of the mindset, every day I get you off the street is closer to getting you to permanent housing.
Mr. Mayor. Hi, Mr. Mayor.
How are you?
Good. Yesterday, Congressman Richie Torres had a news conference about monkeypox. He was very critical of the federal delay and rollout. But the community leaders with him said that the only vaccination location is in Bronx Science. They say it's not accessible and it's not really good. Is there any plan to open up more vaccination locations?
Well, we need to listen to them because we have accessibility is important. And so we haven't heard that. That was not communicated directly to us, but I will speak with the Commissioner of Department of Health and Mental Hygiene because we have to have accessibility. We have been fighting to get our share. 25% of the cases are here in New York. We were getting almost 50% of the proportionate level of vaccines, but I'm going to speak with the Commissioner this afternoon and find out where are all of our sites. I know we are big on making sure that it's accessible. Yeah, let me just one question. That's what I'm getting ready to have a meeting with right now. The goal is this continuous battle of making sure dangerous people that are arrested are prosecuted, go through the criminal justice system, and off our streets. It's taking too long to sentence dangerous people. While they're on our streets, they continue to commit crimes. We continually have this catch, release, repeat mindset. We got to get that under control.
So when you see numbers that grand larceny is up 49%, auto thefts are up 46%, felony assaults are up 19%, you see those numbers and you attribute all of that to this revolving door?
No, but if as the Commissioner pointed out when she did her release last week or a week and a half ago, she showed you the repeated offenders. She showed you the proportion of people who are getting arrested for grand larceny, out the next day and doing it again, who getting arrested for burglary, out doing it again. And so there's a combination, but a substantial number of the people who are doing burglaries, grand larcenies, robberies, they're repeated offenders. And if we don't stop that flow, we're going to have a harder time of getting these numbers under control. Yes.
Your pitch was, I'm the former officer, I can get it under control. What do you say to New Yorkers who wake up and see these numbers in my paper and the daily news about the shootings and the robberies being up? What do you explain?
My responsibility, and we will get crime under control. As we see the decrease in shootings, we see a decrease over the last few weeks in homicides. 2 areas we had to zero in on because the taking of a life is significant. Those 2 important areas. And Chief Mandry, Chief of Patrol, is going to focus on those other crimes. But I cannot be clearer that we've created an atmosphere in the city, if not the country, that people who commit these crimes are not being held accountable. And that sends a signal on the streets that we can continue to commit these crimes. Catch, release, repeat cannot be a criminal justice mantra.